The next game that I'm going to take a look at is Saratoga, which is part of the Battles of the American Revolution system. It is actually Volume 1. There's quite a few games in the system, and mine happens to be the second printing. And this is basically a somewhat tactical level. I mean, the strength points on the units represent about 100 men, and the turn is about an hour, and a game is like 10 to 12 turns, and it takes up, generally speaking, is 1 day, and then the battle's over. And you're fighting for some victory point locations, so there's some geographic objectives that both sides have. Often they're different from each other. And then, of course, there are losses of generals or losses of units and captured generals and captured units. So this all comes into an effect. The sequence of play in this game is you start off by determining initiative. Sometimes the games have a predetermined initiative for the first turn. So you roll off for this, then whoever wins gets to go first. And they do movement. Then after the movement, they can rally units that are shattered or disrupted and see if they can get them out of that morale state. Then there's defensive artillery fire. So if you have artillery, they can fire at range if there's a line of sight. And there is a 2-hit number. So you roll a 10-sided die and see if you can hit the unit you're aiming at. There are die roll modifiers for this for various things. Then there's a rifle fire phase. So if some of the militia units have a little circle with an R on it, meaning that they actually have rifles, which a few units do, they get to fire at range. And that's also using a 2-hit number on a table. And then after that, adjacent units can attack. Its combat is mandatory at this scale. And all of the units, not artillery, but the rest of the units, rifle and otherwise, will roll on an odds-based combat chart. And there are a number of die roll modifiers that are applied that take you up and down to kind of factor in all kinds of things, but you get to see the detail on how it shakes out. I guess that's the value of doing it that way. And then after that, the second player gets to go and do the same thing that you just did, and then there's an end of turn segment to move on to the next hour of gameplay. So that's pretty much how this game works. In the Battle of Saratoga, one of the things that is modeled in this game is the problem of fog. This battle started off with dense fog, which will mostly affect line of sight. I suppose there's the potential to get lost as well. The battlefield is heavily wooded, and basically the woods are difficult to travel through unless you're on a path, and if you're not, then if you're a light troop, you can move fairly quickly through it, but your regular formations have a difficult time. Artillery has a difficult time moving through this, but that's all modeled in the terrain effects and the movement allowances of the unit types. Another main mechanism in this game is that there is a morale track for each side. So when you have something good happens in battle against the enemy, typically your morale will move up by 1 point, theirs will move down by 1 point. And so the morale track is divided into probably 3 segments. So if you get to high morale, you get die roll bonuses on the initiative roll, and whenever you're trying to rally troops, you have a bonus on their morale number. If you're in the average range, there are no bonuses, and if you're low morale, you have negative modifiers to the initiative roll and also to the rallying rolls. So that's one of the things that this game models. And on the American side, there is a unique situation. You have the senior general is General Gates, and the junior general is Benedict Arnold. And Arnold was really in favor of taking some action to spoil the British advance. Gates didn't want to do that, so they ended up compromising. So Arnold does have some flexibility in moving some of his units forward to try to preempt the British. Gates, his forces are kind of stuck in their camp until either the British get close enough to trigger them into freedom, or secondly, if there's a turn eventually that will free Gates to troops to do whatever. So that's a lot later in the game. So those are some things modeled here. I'll just take probably a brief look at this game and how it plays. So hope you enjoy it. So it is Saratoga, September 19th, 1777. And turn one of the game starts at 8 a.m. and only the British player moves on this turn. So we roll a die for the weather and the result is a 6, which is moderate fog. So that means that none of the British units will be using strategic movement and there will be no fire combat, which there wouldn't be anyway because nobody's in contact. So Brigadier General Fraser moves along the track with his section of the army, and then General Burgoyne follows him in the rear. General Burgoyne is the commanding general here, and you can see in the picture there's a traffic jam of sorts that's going to develop because of the fog and the slow advance into contact toward the enemy, trying to use this track to maximize movement. The British plan here is for Fraser to move along the western flank while Burgoyne strikes from the east by going along the Great Ravine. So in this first picture you can see that Brigadier General Fraser is on the point, and the next unit you see is the 1st Chasseurs, which is a Brunswicker unit. It's a light unit, so it will have movement advantages in terrain. Then you see the New York Loyalists, the Canadian Loyalists, then Lieutenant General Burgoyne, the 28-foot and the 62-foot. And that's all that really happens on turn 1, 8 o'clock. If you want to see what happens next, please stay tuned.